Hello, my lovely morbid friends. How are you today? I hope you're having a lovely day. I don't know why I just sang that. I don't know. I think I'm just trying to get into like a good zone with today's case. So fun fact, I actually already recorded this case, but when I watched the footage, I was just like, do I really want, I don't know. So I decided to record it again, and well, oh yeah, intro. Well, if you're new here, hey, my name is Liz, and this is Create and Crime Time, where most of the time I create art and talk about a true crime at the same time. And if you are highly interested, I recommend you subscribe, turn your notification bell on to all, and you can stay along with the ride. And so, a little preface about today's case. We are talking about a case that is actually about a woman from the town I lived in here in New Hampshire. And also, I never knew that she renamed the farm that she lived on. I already knew, like, it was named because of the, like, prior owner, but I didn't know she changed the name. So, this is, I'm going to dub it this name because I actually really like it. And this is the Silver Lover Farm Murders. And the person I'm talking about is Sheila Labarre. If you have not heard of her, I highly recommend you to look her up because she's batshit crazy. Also, I swear, if you don't like it, but anywho, let's get into today's case. Alright, let's coat the vocal cords. So, Sheila Labarre. She was born on the 4th of July, 1958 in Fort Payne, Alabama. So, what is to know about her childhood? Sheila was definitely in a very broken and battered home. Her father was an alcoholic, and her mother, Ruby, really tried to make sure that Sheila and her sister were very safe, but that wasn't the case. Sheila, from a young age, experienced sexual abuse from her dad, but not only just her dad, she experienced it from his friends as well. When her father was in a drunken stupor, he would take her and basically pawn her off on his friends so they could use her as basically as a sex slave from a very young age. And she was treated like this all the way up until she graduated high school and would marry her first husband. So Sheila got married to John Baxter basically to get out of her home life situation. And when you think about a person that has already dealt with trauma and trying to escape that trauma, you think that they're doing it for good for themselves. But with Sheila, she was mentally very affected by what her dad did to her. And of course, anybody else in the same situation would feel the same way. Well, her marriage to John only lasted 6 weeks. And the reason being is because of the abuse and all of the, like, them using her as a toy really got to her head. And she wasn't a motherly figure. She didn't know how to take care of another person because she barely knew how to take care of herself. So when she married John, she became a stepmother. And unfortunately, his child informed him of what she was doing to her. She was giving her alcohol and, like, medicine to make sure that she was taken care of, like, and incapacitated so that Sheila didn't have to take care of her. And when John found out about it, he divorced her. And he just, obviously, me as a mom, you don't do that to a child. You don't make them physically incapacitated to the point where you don't have to take care of them. They're just going to be there in a vegetative state. You don't do that. And John was quick to divorce her. But it wouldn't be that long until Sheila met Ronnie Jennings, and that would be her next husband. But this marriage also doesn't last very long. So during this marriage is when Sheila's abusive side and started to come out. So all of that abuse that was taken out on her from her dad, she is now learning that she can use that same power to get what she wants from a man, not only in a sexual way, but also in a harmful way, of being physically abusive. So she's luring them in with her, like a black widow, basically. She's luring them into her trap so she can get her claws into them, get whatever she wants, and just rid herself of them. That's what she's doing. And the only way she knows basically how to do it is to offer herself up, because that's what she's been taught to do, is you're there for sex, that's what I'm going to use you for. So she's using that as personal gain. She does this with Ronnie, and eventually she starts abusing him. She starts abusing him to get what she wants, and he tries to divorce her. Well, that doesn't happen, because Sheila takes an undisclosed amount of medicine. Basically, I think she took enough to OD. She ends up getting behind the wheel of a car, and she causes a very serious car accident where she is left in a comatose state. And she's in this comatose state. And when she finally wakes up is when she starts telling everybody about this amazing dream she had. And this dream is basically where she was told in heaven that she was an angel sent by God to punish pedophiles. And this is what she would continue to say through the course of when people ask why she did what she did, is she was heaven sent and is an angel to rid the world of pedophiles. That's her whole means behind her crimes, is that she's going to get rid of all the people that touch children. So they end up divorcing after she wakes up, and she now has this new mindset. So obviously after the divorce, Sheila doesn't have a man. So she starts to look at like Lonely Hearts ads and different things like that. In 1987, this is when she responds to a Lonely Heart ad from Wilfrid Labarre. Now, Wilfrid Labarre is a very wealthy chiropractor in Epping, New Hampshire, and he lives on a 100-plus acre horse farm. He was known in the area to be a very nice chiropractor, like a very nice guy. He was just an old man that lived on farmland, and nobody really disturbed him because, I mean, he lived on his own property, he paid his taxes, he was known in town as being a nice dude, and he was just lonely because, I mean, he was by himself on a horse farm. So he put out the ad, and Sheila is the one that responded, and the way she responded wasn't just with words. She sent him photographs, and not just a normal, like, oh, here's a selfie. No, she took topless pictures and full body nudity, like, sent pictures to him. And it wouldn't be, like, very long of communication before she flew up from Alabama to New Hampshire and moved in with him. And when that was just like the start of her putting her claws into him. After she got full control of everything is when she started to just weasel her way in to start controlling everything. Like, so Bill, that's what they called him. Bill had his very, very successful chiropractic office. Sheila would become his office manager, and she would start running everything, absolutely everything. She started like running his farm, like literally taking the reins of everything from him so he didn't have to do it, and she would be the primary control. Well, it wasn't just his business in his home that he was doing it to. She was doing this with. She started wedging herself in getting him away from his adult children. That way he was isolated and he was all Sheila's. He had no contact with his children. And his adult children didn't like that. They also didn't like her very much because here comes this ostentatious young woman who likes to wear very tight clothing that is seducing my father and taking away my inheritance. Like, pretty sure you wouldn't like that either. But it was also known that Sheila had quite a was known around town, and she had quite the nickname. She was called Sheila the Peeler, and the reason why she was called Sheila the Peeler is because the clothing she wore was so tight, people thought she would just like peel off her clothing so they could get a look at the body underneath. And when she would answer the door to the farm, she was either in like very skimpy clothing, one piece of clothing, or nothing. Like, she was known to be almost butt-ass naked answering the door. So her and Bill would be together for 17 years, but they never married. She would eventually just take his last name. So instead of being called Sheila Bailey, she would be known as Sheila Labarre. The cops in town also knew her. And they also knew that if they had to... Sorry, they're blowing leaves outside. They also knew that if they had to respond to a call at her house, to never show up alone, because she would be almost butt-ass naked and use her sexual advances to get what she wants and to manipulate them. They knew the type of woman she was, and they also knew that she would call them all the time. It was known that she was in constant correspondence with the cops. So, within 1 year of her arriving, she literally had everything she wanted from Bill. And he had him sign everything over to her. The farm was put in her name, his business was put in her name, nothing was in his name, everything was in hers. And my belief is she did this because she wanted everything. She didn't want him to have nothing. And then when it came time for him to die, nothing would go to his children and everything would stay hers, which is exactly what would happen. But I'm skipping kind of forward in this little scenario, and also got a little bit darker, so let's brighten it up, shall we? Alright, so also Lieutenant Wallace for the Epping Police Department also responded to a domestic disturbance call that happened one time, and he reflected on this when he was called to testify against Sheila. And when he knocked on the door, Wilfred answered, but he was seen with cuts and like visible markings on his body, but nothing ever really came of this phone call, or any charges made. Nothing came of it. So what she did was she made sure she isolated who she had, and she would brainwash them basically to make them know that she was the one in power. They weren't. They were just like this simple ant that she was just kicking around on the ground. Like, she was the one that had all the reins. And for her, being a small town, having this farm, she was in her own safe zone, so she could do whatever she wanted and nobody could like watch her. Because I mean, you're on 100+ acre farm, you have the land to do what you want, and the neighbors on that road, they're close, but it's like they're not that close. So you would be able to do whatever you want and run around on your land butt-ass naked without anybody like yelling at you to cover yourself. Like, she literally could do whatever she wanted. So Sheila also convinced Bill that even though they weren't married, but they were together, he couldn't refer to her as his wife or his girlfriend. She wanted to be that single lady. So even though she had him, they didn't have a sexual relationship anymore. They were still like together, he couldn't be her boyfriend. He couldn't be her husband. None of that. Sheila was single. So eventually she would meet a man named Wayne Ennis, and Wayne Ennis was actually I believe he was on a green card, like a working green card, and he was working on the clinic, on the chiropractic clinic, just doing some things here and there. And they would meet, her and Sheila and Wayne, and they would end up developing this sexual relationship. Well, this is so bizarre. She would end up calling the cops on Wayne and basically saying that he abused her and he was beating her. But not even that long after that phone call, they got married. I find it so weird. But this marriage wouldn't last long either, just like her first two. After Wayne moved in with her and Bill, Sheila asked Wayne if he would help her kill Bill. That she would said if he was gone, they would have everything and they could live happily on the farm together. Well, Wayne is now put in this predicament where, oh my goodness, this woman that I married that's absolutely crazy is asking me to kill her boyfriend, who she stole everything from. What am I going to do? Well, Wayne did the smart thing and he ended up telling Bill. Bill helped him leave. He brought him to a bus station so he could go to the airport and then go back home to where he was. So Wayne ended up leaving her grasps. Well, Sheila obviously wasn't very happy about this, and I'm pretty sure she ended up taking out like her anger and frustration on Bill. And this poor man, we know the extent of what she did, and it's documented, like well documented, especially on her behalf, but we will never like truly know because we couldn't physically see it and we weren't the ones doing it. So the next person that she has in her grasps is a man named James Brackett, and he ends up living with her and Bill for 5 years. And during this time is when Bill actually passes away. Now, she doesn't tell his family that he dies. She just, informs the police that he died of a heart attack on the floor. He has his autopsy done, and then he's cremated like right after. And his family found that very suspicious as to why she never told them, because, that's his family, especially his children. But his autopsy did, in fact, state that he passed away due to a heart attack, with a few other attributing things, but it wasn't like nothing really jumped out like, oh my God, Sheila killed him. His children believe, and even to this day, they believe that she killed him, which a lot of people do. So now that Bill is gone, there's nobody to stabilize her. She doesn't have that primary male figure there with her to be like, oh, hey, Sheila, you need to calm down, or hey, Sheila, I'm here if you need anything. She only has James, her person that she has in her web. So during this time, her abuse on him escalates, and it escalates so, like, to the point where James is trying to find a way out. And it is known that Sheila would call sex phone lines, and this is when this was like super popular still. So she would call these chat lines, and she would have him listen to her talk about her deep fantasies and everything she wanted to do, all the sick, nasty fantasies that she wants. Now, if people are into that stuff, more power to you. I'm talking about this woman, so I don't mean to offend you. And if I did, sorry. But we're talking about Sheila Labarre. So she would make him listen to what she was talking about on the phone. And eventually, during a very bad snowstorm, he was able to escape. He got away, and he ended up going to a warming shelter. And from there, that's when he truly did get out of her grasp. So this is, if he didn't escape, he would have been victim number one. Although we don't even know who victim number one is. I'll also get to that after we talk about Michael DeLoge and Kenneth County. So these are the two men that are confirmed kills for her, Michael DeLoge and Kenneth County. And literally, this could have been prevented with Kenneth's death if the police department actually did what they should have done and not what they did. But I just lived there, especially when it happened. Things happen. Bad things always happen. But police not doing anything, that also happens. But anywho, so Michael DeLoge was a drifter from Connecticut, and he ended up coming up to New Hampshire. He was staying in a homeless shelter. He was known as an active drug addict. He was divorced, and he had a young child. And he had nowhere else to go when he came up to New Hampshire. So he met Sheila, and she said to him, "Oh, I live on this farm. If you come and help me, you can have somewhere to live, and I'll also," somehow she threw it in there that she would give him sex. I think probably like she would give him sex as payment instead of giving him money. So, I mean, obviously, if you're a dude, you have this woman who was known at the time to have a banging body, is offering herself to you for just helping her at her farm. Most men are going to take that. They're not going to think that she's some crazy woman. So he ended up going with her. And he would be, like, disappear exactly 1 year later. So the way he died is not known. What is known is what is on actual recordings that she made, and it's also known that there was one time where she attacked him where she almost severed his ear. And also, there was another time when their neighbors noticed that there was a man walking down the dirt path, and this man was stumbling, and he was bleeding from his head. And that's when they noticed that it was Michael. And when Michael passed one of the other neighbors, the only thing he said was Sheila, and he just kept walking. His parents would try and convince him to leave after they made contact with him. They tried to convince him to leave, and that was especially after he had mentioned how terrified he was. But he wouldn't leave. And in response to his parents trying to convince him, Sheila sent a video of him accusing his mother of abusing him as a young child, and how dare she do that to him. His face was noted to be scratched and bruised during this video. And eventually, the brainwashing that Sheila did made Michael believe that he was a pedophile. This is what she did. You know how I told you that during her dream of when she was comatose, she believed she was heaven sent and she was ridding the world of pedophiles? This is what she's doing. She's making this man think that he's a pedophile even though he's not. We know he's a homeless drug addict who is just a drifter, who's trying to find his way back in life, but she has convinced him that he's a drug addict. So also what to know is that Sheila was very good at recording things, and she recorded countless videos and phone calls and tape recordings, things like that. And they found over 300 different tapings of videos and telephone calls and voice recordings of her and Kenneth County, Michael DeLoge, her phone calls to the police department, different things like that. She had it all recorded. And this also helped implicate her in a lot of different things, which I don't understand why she didn't think of this while she did these things, but when you're in that mindset, I am pretty sure you just what you're thinking about is the end goal, which is ridding yourself of these people and just getting what you want. So if it's not in her like thought process, she's not going to do it. So shortly after this video was sent to Michael DeLoge's parents is when he was gone. So Sheila, whenever she had a farmhand that was helping her and then would disappear, she would call the cops and just let them know that they were gone. I don't know why she did this. I think it was like a security blanket type thing. So she would just be like, oh, hey, by the way, they don't live with me anymore. Just want to let you know, just keep it in touch. Which I find like super strange. A lot of people do actually find it like really strange as to why she was doing this. But I mean, I guess it kind of gives her like an alibi stating that they're gone. But anywho, now that Michael is gone, she's alone. So she has nobody with her on the farm. And this is when she went back to sex chat rooms and sex chat lines, different things like that, and dating services to try and find a new guy to just get her claws in. And what she would do is she would put her stuff out there and men would contact her. What she would do after they'd contact her is she'd filter through them. Any messages she got of men that had like a super strong voice, nope, she didn't want them. She wanted the men that had like that hint of, I need these things, like had that hint of sensitivity in their voice. Those are the ones she wanted. One of them was Kenneth County. Now, Kenneth County, from a young age, was definitely on the slower side. The left hemisphere of his brain didn't mature enough, so he was definitely more delayed than others his age. And his mother knew that. His mother, Carolyn, was really like the backbone when it came to what happened to him and her trying to get him help while he was in Sheila's clutches. But the cops never helped her, which is what is so frustrating about this case. But anywho, with Kenneth, she lured him in like a moth to a flame. It was super easy. He wanted to be a strong, independent man, and here comes this beautiful woman that wants me for who I am, and she's 20 years older than me, and I'm gonna go live on her farm, stuff like that. Well, they ended up meeting at, they say it's a fancy bar, but they actually met at the Ashworth by the Sea in Hampton, and after they had a few drinks, they ended up in her car, and they had sex in the backseat. So classy, right? Woo! Alright, so, but before all this, before he met Sheila, he enlisted in the military. And I'm telling you this because I want you to know what state he was in before he met Sheila. So he wanted to be a strong man, and in order to do that, he enlisted in the military. And his mom, although she was sad to see him go, she knew that she had to. This is what he wanted to do. So when he enlisted, he wanted to become that proud man. Well, unfortunately, Kenny, which is what they called him, he wouldn't graduate basic training. He would just be the one that would be helping direct traffic that day. And his sergeant told Carolyn that. This is what really like put him into a downward spiral. He became super depressed. He tried to kill himself. Like this is something he really wanted and he couldn't do it. And he was definitely really heartbroken. And this is why he turned to the sex chat rooms and stuff like that. He wanted to feel important. He wanted to feel like he was needed by another person. And then he met Sheila, and here she is meeting such a person that's so emotionally wounded. It's somebody perfect that she can just take and just groom to be hers. So they met, they had sex. She convinced him to move in with her on the farm, and he moved in on the farm. Now Carolyn doesn't like her. She's taking away her son. Like, no. The last time she saw Kenny is when he moved out of his Wilmington apartment to move to Epping, to the Silver Lovers farm with Sheila. So Carolyn eventually would call Epping Police Department because she didn't hear from Kenny. It had been a few days since he moved in. She's a very protective mom, like she wants to make sure that he's okay. So they visit the farm. Sheila answers, and they ask where Kenny is. Can they talk to him? So she calls Kenny forward, and he comes forward, and he's got a towel on him because he was in the shower. So they see he's okay. They then call Carolyn and let her know that he's okay. Sheila becomes furious. Now, because of this, she then, similar to what happened with Michael DeLoge and his mom, Sheila forces Kenny to make a tape that says Carolyn molested him when he was younger, and as young as him being an infant, all the way up into his his teenage years. And Carolyn was very saddened by this, that Kenny would say this, but she knew that it wasn't him really saying it, that it was just Sheila saying it through his voice. Sheila would use pedophilia as a true manipulative tactic. Because of everything she endured when she was younger, she's now throwing it on men that she can use to her advantage. So because of this tape, Carolyn wouldn't stop calling and trying to contact the farm and contact the police department about well-being checks. Well, there was one time where she called about a well-being check, and they said no, they wouldn't check up on him. And she said she was afraid for her son's life. The police department ended up saying that, oh, she's not a murderer, that's not her MO. And Carolyn was just like, what do you mean that's not her MO? She's not a killer, and she doesn't kill her farm hams. What she does is she contacts us when they leave and tells us that they left. And Carolyn thought it was really odd, but she kept pushing for more answers, and she kept pushing to have welfare checks done for her son, because he's kind of like an intellectual disability where he doesn't have the full left side of his brain. It's not fully developed. So she's very worried about his well-being. And she just wanted to get answers. As that super protective mom, she wants to know that her son is okay, and the police weren't doing that. The next and final time that Kenny was seen in Epping in public was at Walmart. Now, this is going to sound like such a small town thing, but when we moved there, Walmart wasn't there. And Walmart went in a few years afterwards, and it was the big thing in the town, because Epping was very small. I mean, when we moved there was less than 5,000 people living there. I think they're at 7,500 people now. It's super small. So everybody knew everybody. Everybody kind of knew everybody's business, basically. And when Epping went in, it was just this huge thing, and every resident in town was invited to go the day before the grand opening. That way they could get their shopping in, and then everybody else in surrounding areas could enjoy Walmart. I know it sounds really, really dumb and super small town thing, but that's what happened. And this is actually where Kenneth would last be seen, because so a lot of people in town saw him, especially the police, so if you're not aware, obviously people shoplift, and in Walmarts and Targets, certain places like that, certain department stores, the cops tend to have their own little room in the front, and they have their own parking spaces. Well, there was Epping cops there this day, and this day was March 21st. No, this was the 19th. Sorry. So this was March 19th, and Kenneth was seen in a wheelchair with Sheila pushing him around, and they were shopping for just a few things. Diesel gas jugs was one of them, and she made him hold them. Well, people noticed the state he was in. He couldn't walk, that's why he was in the wheelchair. He was very ashen in color. He had cuts, bruises, and burns all over his body. He was wearing a beanie to cover his head. And the police also saw them too. And a lot of other people in town saw them. So, police, they see him, they ask him if he was okay. Sheila says that he was in a car accident, that's why he's in the wheelchair. That's why he looks like he does. So, the cops kind of just like, oh, okay, he was in a car accident. They don't really like think anything of it, and they especially don't think anything of it with like the diesel cans. She lives on a farm, so I mean, maybe she needs the diesel cans. That way, she could she can add more fuel to some of her equipment. It's not really like something they really think about, and after they see Sheila put Kenneth in the car, the police contact Carolyn to let her know that they saw him in the state he was in, stuff like that. She asked them why they didn't do anything and why they didn't take him from her. And they said they couldn't do anything because there's no crime that they see. They asked her why he looked like that. She said it was a car accident. So they legally couldn't do anything. Carolyn was super upset by this, and unfortunately 2 days after this, Kenneth would die. That was on March 21st, 2006. Leading us to March 23rd, 2006. Sheila called the police chief of Epping to basically just say that Kenneth left, and she played an audio recording that she took of Kenny where he implicated himself in different pedophilia charges and different things like this, which we know from the outside looking in, this is so not right and so not true. Kenny wasn't a pedophile. He was just a young man that didn't understand what was happening, and he was stuck with this woman who just wanted to take everything from him. And basically what the cops heard is that Sheila was verbally berating Kenny. They heard him vomit during the recording, and they also heard him faint, and they could hear Sheila say, "Oh, look at you fainting," stuff like this. And after the phone call, the police informed Carolyn that Kenny left, and she filed a missing persons report. But because the cops were kind of spooked with the recording that they heard from Sheila, they ended up going to the farm, and on the next day, which is the 24th, and they found strong evidence to prove that Kenneth just didn't walk away. I mean, they saw his shoes just kind of sitting there. He wouldn't be just walking away barefoot without his sneakers, especially in March in New England. There's snow, it's cold. So what they end up seeing is they see a fire burning in a fire pit, and they see personal effects like clothing and like papers and different things like that is burning in this fire pit. But they also see something else. Two other things. They see a bone, what looks like a human bone, and they also see a human toe. So while the cops see this, Sheila comes out and she starts very agitating, like she's super agitated by them. She verbally berates them, telling them to get off her property, and basically just trying anything she can to get them off her property. She's super pissed. So one of the officers asks her, "Oh, what are you burning?" Oh, she states it could be a rabbit, or it could be a pedophile. So nonchalant, just could be a rabbit or it could be a pedophile. They didn't really think anything of her answer. And then they see a bag that's filled with debris. It's a plastic bag. And they ask her what's in it. She just, "Oh, that's Kenny." Just, "Oh, that's Kenny." Super nonchalant, just like, there it is. So, with everything they saw and with what she said, they ended up obtaining a warrant to search the property, and during this search is when they find more fragments of human bone in the pit. They end up flushing out the septic tank, and they find Michael DeLoge's driver's license and his birth certificate. And inside the house, in one of the rooms, they end up using a product called LCV, and what this does is it detects blood and blood spatter. So when they spray it on this room and they use a black light, the whole room lights up purple. It's kind of like if you use a black light on different like stains and stuff like that in the carpet, or if you want to see if there's like germs or anything after you use like an antibacterial spray and stuff like that. If you use a black light, you'll still be able to see what's remaining. Well, that's what they did. Even though everything on the outside looking in, everything was clean, as soon as they sprayed this, they can see that, oh my goodness, some act of extreme violence happened in this room. And after finding that Michael DeLoge's effects, the parts of bone, parts of charred bone, and other personal effects of Kenneth counties, they obtain an arrest warrant for Sheila. Now, Sheila, and also because this is a small town, is able to escape. Don't come at me with the cops should be on this. If you're in a small town, your police force is not massive. We had 4 cops at the time. 2 of them were one was a detective. There's also a lieutenant, and they had help from the Raymond Police Department and other police departments in the area to help them. Small towns don't have a lot of cops. That's what happens. So, she was able to evade the cops. She ended up taking $85,000 with her, and she hitched a ride from a man named Steve Martello, and they were driving down to Boston. So what happened is she ended up renting a motel room for the night before they got to his place. She seduced him, so they had sex with each other. And eventually she convinces him to let her stay at his apartment. So when she's there at his apartment, he is out doing whatever. He sees her on the news and is like, oh my God, that's the woman that I just had sex with. Is she gonna kill me? She informs the cops, and they end up finding her and arresting her. So she's charged with first-degree murder for Michael DeLoge in Kenneth County. What she does is she enters a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity or mental defect, and this is quickly rejected due to how cold-blooded and calculated this whole thing was, and her means of rejecting the idea that she was a fallen angel sent down from heaven, that she needed to rid the world of all the pedophiles. No, they weren't having that. Everything she did was so calculated. She manipulated all these men into doing what she wanted. No. So during her trial, she ended up being diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder and delusional disorder. They believe this is also attributed from her childhood. Everything she endured brought these out. But this also doesn't clear her of her guilt. So Carolyn, Kenneth's mom, and then Michael DeLoge's parents were there when she was sentenced. She was sentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences in jail for the murder of Kenneth and Michael in June of 2008. So what I do know is that they don't know exactly how Michael died, but they found remnants of him on the property. And Kenneth County was stabbed to death and then eventually burned as she sat there and watched while petting her rabbit. Her ex-husband Wayne Ennis and her ex-boyfriend James Brackett also gave testimony during the case into her asking Wayne to help her kill Bill and her abuse on James. And this all solidified everything people knew about her, that she was not mentally stable and that she really did kill these men. So that is the true crime case of Sheila Labarre. Again, there is other things that I didn't talk about, especially when it comes to what the police did and didn't do in this case, which, I mean, with what I told you, I mean, you can see that they didn't do anything until they saw that human toe. If they just listened to Carolyn, Kenneth County would be alive, but what is already done in the past is what is done. None of us can change that. We're just happy as human beings that she's in jail and she will not hurt another person, and that hopefully she's getting all the help that she needs now. She is not in a women's facility in the state of New Hampshire. She's actually incarcerated in Florida in a maximum security prison. Because they have a women's prison here in New Hampshire, but it's not a super secure facility, and they don't have the greatest mental health help here in New Hampshire. And also, if you couldn't tell, I lived there. During this time, when this crime happened, while it was on the news, while it was shown on WMUR, my family, other people I know, they saw her and him, they saw her and Michael DeLoge, her and James Brackett. A lot of people saw them in town. So I didn't want to cover this case, but at the same time I did want to cover this case because, I mean, you guys know that I live in New Hampshire, but now you know, like, one of the towns I lived in, so it was kind of like a security thing. But because I knew this case, I knew there was things that I wasn't going to, like, know happened. Like, them finding the toe, I didn't know about. And a lot of people didn't really know about her, like, early life and her abuse that she suffered as a child. That was something that really wasn't talked about until the actual trial happened, and then it came out. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's case. If you did, hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next true crime case. Bye, guys.